Imhotep, not a pharaoh, not a conqueror, not the son of a god. And yet, without him, there are no pyramids at Giza. Because before Egypt could build perfection in stone, it first had to solve a structural weakness in its own power. If the pharaoh is divine, why does his tomb decay? In Egypt, that question was dangerous, and that contradiction is where this story begins. This is Unblocked History, where the lives of people explain the rise and fall of civilizations. We are in Egypt, late 27th century BCE. The Old Kingdom is still young. Unification is recent. Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt have been fused under one crown. But unity on a map does not guarantee unity in reality. Local elites still hold influence. Regional identities still linger. The state is forming, but it is not yet unbreakable. At the top stands King Djoser, divine, living embodiment of order. In Egyptian thought, the king maintains Ma'at, cosmic balance. If he rules well, the Nile floods properly. If he falters, chaos creeps in. But there is a visible problem. When earlier kings died, they were buried in mastabas, low rectangular tombs made of mud brick, solid for a generation, impressive for a moment, but vulnerable to time. Mud brick cracks, wind erodes, moisture weakens, and eventually they collapse. Imagine the contradiction. The king is eternal, but his tomb is temporary. The ruler is divine, but his monument dissolves. In a society where the afterlife is not metaphor, but infrastructure, that is dangerous. Because in Egypt, the tomb is functional. The king's body must survive. His spirit, his Ka, must recognize its house. Offerings must continue. Rituals must repeat. If the tomb decays, continuity is disrupted. If continuity is disrupted, order weakens. If order weakens, the state fractures. This is not a design problem. It is a stability problem. And that problem lands in the hands of one man, Imhotep. Chancellor to Djoser, High Priest of Ra at Heliopolis, the intellectual center of solar theology, administrator, engineer, scholar. We know very little about him from his lifetime. No long autobiographies, no detailed inscriptions. But centuries later, Egyptians will worship him as a god of wisdom and healing. That alone tells you something happened here. Imhotep sees the weakness. If divine kingship is to endure, its architecture must endure. Mud brick implies mortality. Stone implies permanence. At Saqqara, just south of Memphis, the royal necropolis overlooks the Nile Valley. This is where Imhotep makes his move. The original plan likely follows tradition. A large mastaba, respectable, safe, conventional, but conventional does not solve the problem. So he changes it. He enlarges the mastaba, then stacks another layer on top, then another. 6 levels rising into the sky. The Step Pyramid. The first monumental structure built entirely in cut stone. But here is where tension increases. No one has ever built in stone at this scale. Stone is heavier than brick, less forgiving, harder to cut, harder to transport, harder to align. This is not refinement. This is invention. Quarries expand. Limestone blocks are cut near Tura. Workers experiment with shaping techniques. Sledges drag blocks across prepared ground. Ramps are constructed. Angles are tested. Weight distribution is observed. There is no inherited manual, only iteration. If the structure collapses, it is not just a failed building. It is proof that divine permanence cannot be engineered. That would be catastrophic. And the pyramid itself is only the center of something much larger. The funerary complex covers over 15 hectares. Enclosed by massive limestone walls carved with deep recesses, redans, symbolic boundaries separating sacred from ordinary. Inside, ceremonial courtyards, stone columns carved to resemble bundled reeds, dummy chapels replicating ritual buildings in permanent form, a full architectural simulation of royal life. Why replicate wooden structures in stone? Because ritual must never decay. Because performance must become permanent. Because divine kingship cannot rely on fragile materials. Here is the real innovation. Imhotep does not simply build a tomb, he builds an eternal stage. Inside the complex, Djoser can symbolically perform the Hebsed festival forever, the ritual of royal renewal. Even in death, the king continues to rejuvenate his rule. Architecture becomes a machine for political continuity. Daily life bends around this transformation. Quarry teams coordinate extraction. Transport crews synchronize movement. Scribes track labor rotations and rations. Food redistribution intensifies. New skills develop. Stone cutting demands precision. Precision demands oversight. Oversight strengthens bureaucracy. The state sharpens itself because stone requires it. And something subtle happens. The monument dominates the horizon, visible for miles, a staircase to the sky. For ordinary Egyptians, this is unprecedented. Nothing like it exists anywhere in the world. That visual shock matters, because power is psychological. If the king's monument overwhelms the senses, his authority overwhelms doubt. But innovation creates strain. Stone construction requires centralized control. It requires resource concentration. It requires loyalty. The same forces that stabilize the kingdom also increase pressure within it. After Djoser, pyramid construction accelerates. Designs evolve. Ambitions expand. Smooth-sided pyramids appear. Giza becomes possible, because Saqqara proved stone could carry divine weight. Without Imhotep, there is no Khufu. Without the Step Pyramid, there is no Great Pyramid. And yet, permanence remains an illusion. Centuries later, the old kingdom weakens. Provincial governors gain autonomy. Central authority strains. Monument size decreases. The first intermediate period begins. Even stone cannot prevent political fragmentation. So, what was the central problem Imhotep solved? Not how to stack blocks, but how to stabilize divine kingship. He transformed a fragile burial tradition into a permanent ideological machine. He replaced decay with geometry. He replaced mud with limestone. He replaced symbolic eternity with engineered eternity. And that is why his name survives. While many kings fade into obscurity, Imhotep is remembered, glorified, then deified, worshipped as a god of wisdom and medicine. Because he did something radical. He redesigned how permanence worked. The Step Pyramid is not the largest pyramid. It is not the smoothest. It is not the most famous. But it is the turning point. The moment Egypt decides that eternity must be constructed. The central question was never, how did Imhotep build it? It was, why did Egypt need stone at all? Because divine authority without permanence is unstable. Because belief without architecture is fragile. Because civilizations survive only when they solve their internal contradictions. Imhotep solved one, and in doing so, he launched the Age of Pyramids, not through conquest, not through prophecy, but through limestone. The first step upward was not about height. It was about stability. And once Egypt believed eternity could be engineered, there was no turning back.